I definitely need to work on the chat, but it looks like the video and audio is working fine for everyone. So thank you for joining. Really excited about this webinar. For those that don't know, welcome to the Test Guild webinar on effective BDD rollout, collaborating using OOPSI and Automate in Minutes with Jerome. Jerome is the founder and CTO of NoCodeBDD. He has I believe, more than 20 years of experience in software development. And he's been rolling out behavior-driven development for large projects in the UK for many, many years, really being successful with it. He has a real strong Java development background and has been a technical consultant. And he's one of the largest enterprise projects he's ever worked on was actually successfully rolling out behavior-driven development, consisting of more than, I believe it was 10,000 scenarios. So he's also the co-founder of NoCodeBDD, which helps you speed up BDD automation by 10x and helps improve efficiency. So really excited to have Jerome join us today. Before we get into it, if you're in the chat, just say hello, make sure the chat is working, or it's actually a questions thing. I'm actually working on this to make it better, but I'm just going to say hello. It doesn't say the name, but let's get that going. And then I'll be bringing Jerome in. All right, so I see Jerome in the green room. Jerome, we're about to go live, so get ready and let's do this. Hey,
Fantastic.
Jerome.
Thanks for Hey, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. Really excited about this, and I guess let's just jump right into it. And as we're going along, if anyone has questions, just put them in. And Jerome, I might interrupt you if the question really pertains to what you're showing, but I'll try to keep that to a minimum, and it's all you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty excited as well. Yeah, I've got quite a few slides to cover, so let's get cracking. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Looks
excellent.
Good.
So as Joe mentioned, I just want to share my experience and also show how easy it is to roll out BDD. It's not about easiness as well, how you can effectively roll out and get the maximum business benefits and also reduce cost of rolling out the BDDs. So the takeaways from this webinar are, how do you roll out BDD the right way? One of the difficulties in rolling out BDD is if you roll out BDD not the right way, it just become another testing tool. So you don't actually see any benefits. How do you collaborate using a technique which I've used it in quite a few projects, and it's absolutely brilliant. It brings the entire team together. That technique has got everyone get involved. It's not just for one person. That's the best thing about this technique. That's why I like it so much. And how do you automate BDD in minutes without code? And using NoCodeBDD. I'm the founder of NoCodeBDD. And different things like what is the best reports to look at? How do you run the CI/CD pipeline? How do you run the BDD and take it to the go live path? And also, like when you say, okay, I've implemented particular story. When you're using behavior-driven development, how do you define your definition of done? So I'm going to discuss about all that. So there are quite a lot to catch up. So let's crack on. So traditional software development lifecycle. First, before we look at BDD, let's look at what is wrong with traditional software development lifecycle. Waterfall are agile. What you do is the product owner typically gives the user requirements, BA or the BA. Then the developer takes it. You might argue that, yes, there may be some sort of collaboration, but when you don't have a strong collaboration process, what happens is the developer, the tester, and the BA might discuss about the user story, and then they all go back to their desk. You know how our memories are. People tend to forget things that's been discussed. So the developer takes it, implements the solution, develops the code, and then gives it to the tester, QA. Worst case, the tester does manual testing. The best case, do some automation testing. I've also put BDD testing. I'll explain what BDD testing means. And then they raise bugs. What happens at this point is, the best case, the developer and tester don't agree on the bug. and then they go to the product owner and clarify the bug. That's the best case, but at this time, you've already, let's say if it's a 4-week sprint, you've already lost about 4 weeks, because towards the end of the sprint, you're going and clarifying something to the product owner. And that might completely change the whole, 4 weeks of development work you have done, or it might have an impact of some of the work you have done. I'm talking about the best case. The worst case is the developer and the tester discuss about a bug and they agree on the bug. They themselves decide, okay, this is the way to fix it. And I've seen in many projects, this happens quite a lot. The tester or the QA and the developer discusses about a bug. They decide, without discussing with the product owner or the BA, they decide to go with certain implementation. And worst case, during the demo, if somehow it doesn't get noticed, that whatever implementation they've done, which is a bug, actually goes to live. As a result, you will end up, you would have seen this graph several times. The later the issues are found, the more expensive it gets. So how do you roll out BDD and how do you use BDD to resolve this? The best way to do that is collaboration. So when you start any user story, the three amigos, the product owner or the BA, the developer and the QA, collaborate to formulate scenarios. You should also bring in someone who's close to that story, someone who's part of the implementation. Let's say if the UX designer is required for a story or an architect is required for a story, you would derive scenarios. And this, you basically take your user story and you derive scenarios based on the requirements. Your scenarios should mimic the real world scenarios of that domain. If it's a banking application, your scenarios should talk about banking application. So you derive all the scenarios and you agree with the team. You agree with the team that these are the scenarios we are going to implement. You might derive 15 scenarios for a story, but you agree with the team and the product owner and rest of the team to say, okay, part of this sprint, we are going to implement only 5 scenarios because we are targeting a minimum viable product. Or you might decide to go with 15 scenarios, but whatever you do, you agree with the team. Then the best thing is the developer starts implementing the solution and the QA starts automating it pretty much straight away. So both of these things should happen in parallel. So this is the way to roll out BDD. This is the right way to roll out BDD. You don't start with BDD automation straight away. That's why I put it as BDD testing. It's nothing but BDD testing. All you have done is you've just replaced one type of testing and replaced with another type of testing. By doing that, you don't get any benefits of rolling out BDD. BDD is all about collaboration. So now, as you can see, the modern SDLC has changed. You derive BDD scenarios and the development and testing happens in parallel. You review and deploy. Whereas if you look at the traditional way, you would have seen this diagram before. Traditional way is you take the requirement, development, complete the development, complete the testing, and then go through the life cycle. Whereas the modern SDLC has changed slightly. So let's take a user story. I want to walk you through a process of how I would take a user story and use BDD effectively to derive the scenarios. I've just basically captured this user story from Jira. It's a very simple user story. It's about a student or an alumni registration on a college portal. It's got typical acceptance criteria. Very, very simple. I kept it very simple just for the sake of this webinar. So once the user story is given, you start with collaboration. The reason why you might have to consider a technique like what I'm going to explain is collaboration is can vary quite a lot. I've seen many teams using different type of collaboration. But the problem with all of those collaboration is when you don't have a process or a structure, it just becomes a process where people get together and discuss something about the story. And then when they all go back to the desk, nothing happens. They don't see the benefit of the collaboration. And I've also seen problem where usually the team members who are a bit more vocal are the one who will be running with the collaboration. Let's say if the BA is really strong and the BA is the one who's a bit more vocal compared to all the team members, you would see in the collaboration process, the BA is the one who will be talking, who will be addressing all the scenarios and who will be deriving all the scenarios. And the team members are just there for the sake of being in a collaboration meeting. So that's why I really like this technique called OOPSI. This was first coined by someone called Jenny Martin and Pete Buckney. You can Google about OOPSI. I used to work with Jenny, brilliant QA and an agile coach. So what OOPSI stands for? So OOPSI, the O stands for outcome. When I say outcome, it's the business outcome, not the output. It's the business outcome. What does the business want? Then the next O stands for output, and then process. S stands for scenarios, and the input. Let's go through one by one what it means. So I've taken the same user story, the one we saw here, and then let's look at one by one. So outcome. So what is the business outcome for the story? Typically all the acceptance criteria that comes straight away from the story. Then the product owner or the business analyst will discuss with the team why they need the story. Most importantly, who is it for? Most of the time we forget we are building software for someone. It's always for someone. It doesn't matter what software you build. It's always for a person or a people. So you discuss who is this for, why we are doing this, and what all the business outcome from the story. This is the most important aspect of your BDD rollout. Many projects I've seen, people just develop software solution without understanding why and who is this for. So this is the most important part of your BDD rollout. And the product owner basically leads this, but the team also discusses it and starts talking about the different outcome, because the product owner or the BA might not have thought about different outcome or some other benefits for the business. So the team can provide their input. Once the outcome is established, what we do is, as you can see, we keep the outcome on the side of every thing that we discuss. It's always on the side. If you are using a whiteboard, we put the business outcome on the side of the whiteboard. If you are using an online, we put the business outcome on the online so that we don't take an eye out of the business outcome. It's always in the background. Once that's been established, then we discuss, in order to achieve that outcome, what are the output we require? In this case, the output or anything that goes out of the application, including a database, if you're calling a third party, or if you're showing some other messages to the user on their website, is an output. So you discuss what all the output you require in order to achieve these outcomes. So you take each outcome and say, okay, in order to achieve AC1, acceptance criteria 1, I need to store the information in my database. In order to achieve acceptance criteria 2, I need to show that message in the web. So you discuss about all the output required in order to achieve those business outcomes. So typically, these output are discussed by a tester or the QA, because they are the one who are very much aligned with this. They obviously require some help from the business analyst or the developer, but they lead it. And the process, when it comes to that process, again, you keep the business outcome on the side. Then you discuss about what the process should be within your application in order to achieve those outcomes. So this is, as you can see, this is mainly led by the developer. Others give input into it, but the developer, is the one who knows about the code, who knows about how the code flows. So they basically put the process together. This is extremely useful, particularly when you have junior developers, and the senior developers can come and provide their input into this. So before even starting development, they completely understand what the flow of their application that they are going to develop. If it's an existing application, you can color code it and say, okay, what are all the place you are going to change it? And as you can see, as you implement every story, this process diagram will keep growing, but you can keep just highlighting the parts that you are planning to change. But this process is always about what is the outcome. In order to achieve those output and the outcome, what is the process should be. Once you have defined this process, from this, you can start defining your scenarios. This is absolutely brilliant because now, if you see, I have this conditional block here. Those blocks will enable me to come up with different scenarios. No, as you can see, if it's no, then I have to show it to the user. If it's yes, show it in the database. Then I have to have relevant scenarios for that. The scenarios are basically led by the QA or the tester, So the tester can look at this. Okay, what about these scenarios? What about those scenarios? They also look at the business outcome and look and map each scenario and say, okay, for these AC, these are all the scenarios we are going to have. And for these AC2, these are all the scenarios. And the few critical points in deriving the scenarios is every scenario you derive, you also always ask the question, who is this for? And why are we doing those scenarios? So those are quite important to ask those questions all the time. So, and the scenarios, once you have defined the scenarios, then you can think about the input. You can take each scenario and you can write down what all the input required for those scenarios. I've made it very simple, but if you think about a large application, this process can be quite complex. Like for an example, you can take a scenario and say, okay, I need an XML for this. What all the information I require in those XML? That XML, you may not have it straight away because that XML, someone might have to give it to you. You will straight away know there is a gap in this because that XML has to maybe come from an architect. So you need to start bringing in the architect. This is all even before you start developing. Bringing in the architect and ask him to give that XML or at least, derive the XML schema. Or if you're using a REST API, you need to know what is the JSON information you want. So all this information, you can get it done in that, OOPSI session. And you
Jerome,
can also time box the OOPSI session. It doesn't go all the way.
Quick question,
Yeah,
Jerome.
Joe.
Apologize.
Sure.
Someone just asked, just to clarify, they want to know if this scenario is the same in Cucumber. It's just terminology.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No, it's absolutely. I'll come to that. But these scenarios are exactly what you would do in Gherkin or Cucumber.
Perfect.
Once you have defined the input, now you have what all the information you need. You exactly know, the team exactly knows what we are achieving from this user story. Not just the implementation details, they also know why they are doing the user story and who is this for. When you have those clarity, your software implementation is much better. It completely changes everything. No, it's not just a software anymore. It's actually a tool that the business will appreciate. You not only you have the team understands the business outcome. When they go and start implementing, the developer exactly knows what all the information he will be getting or she will be getting, and what all the information he or she will be storing it, sending out. They also know exactly what the process flow is going to be. As a tester, the tester exactly knows, okay, these are all the information I need to keep it ready. For an example, let's say if it's a REST API, these are all the information, these are all the JSON format I need to keep. And if it's a UI, then the tester exactly knows in this website, I have to enter all this information. The tester also knows what are the information they need to test once, whether they need to test certain values in the database or they need to test certain values that are going out of the application. May it be a JSON data or an XML data. So the team exactly knows how they are going to implement. So by spending an hour or so on OOPSI, the team end up saving quite a lot of time, both on the implementation and also reducing the bugs. But also the product owner or the BA will be quite comfortable and quite confident the team has understood the acceptance criteria and and all the scenarios being covered. Now, if you see, the team are all in sync because they exactly know what are the scenarios they are going to implement. So at the end of 2 weeks or the 4-week sprint, the product owner or BA won't be surprised to see, oh, what about this scenario? You guys haven't implemented that scenario. So in this case, let's say if the team hasn't validated date of birth, the product owner BA won't be surprised because it's not in the scenario. That's the discussion you have upfront. So this is absolutely brilliant. I've been rolling this out for some time now, and the benefit we are seeing is just brilliant. So what we do is, in fact, once we walk through this, we take photocopy or the photo of each of these process and then upload it to our Jira ticket as well. So OOPSI versus traditional. So how is this different? OOPSI, as I showed you, it talks about the outcome. It first talks about the business outcome, which when we didn't follow OOPSI or some sort of collaboration technique, the team doesn't tend to think about the business outcome. They straight away jump into implementation. When you do that, it's poo, because you're talking about input first. It's just poo. So it's quite important you start with always think about the business outcome or the business benefits. So once you have done the collaboration and derived the scenarios, then the developer goes and starts implementing a solution for each scenario. The tester needs to start thinking about automation. There are several products in the market. Cucumber being one of the most popular one. There are quite a good other tools as well, but all of them are scripted. And NoCodeBDD, based on all my experience, I developed NoCodeBDD in my part-time. Now it's in the market. Quite a few clients are using it. Mainly, I developed it because I found, the automation is the critical one, but it's a complex one. And because of that, a lot of companies either not using BDD properly or using BDD partially or not even using BDD at all. So that's why I created a NoCodeBDD. The idea behind that is it makes the automation completely simple, and you can automate in minutes and without code. I'll show you in a minute how it's done. So before we go to why did I create NoCodeBDD is, there are, when you automate, there are a lot of limitations of scripted BDD automation. So it's important you understand when you use a scripted BDD automation like Cucumber. It is expensive because you need to have resources to achieve that automation. And some companies I've seen where they don't try to achieve automation within sprint because of the cost. That has a lot of knock-on effect. So for an example, let's say if you have a 2-week sprint, and if you don't achieve your automation within that sprint, basically what you're saying is we haven't completed our testing. So whenever the testing completes, let's say if it's 4 weeks, only then you can say, okay, your story been done. It has a lot of issues because if an issue being found in the next sprint, you have to pull the developer to fix that issue, means the developer is going away from the current user story. So everything gets delayed. So though you might think, okay, we can do sprint +1 automation or sprint -1 or whatever, you will end up paying for it. So the best way is to hire the resources and achieve 100% sprint 100% automation within that sprint. But it's quite expensive. Typically, when we give, at least when I was rolling out BDD in large projects, we increase the cost of the project by 40% because of BDD automation. This is a very interesting issue, and I've seen pretty much in all projects I've worked. The projects or the companies, what they do is they take their junior testers, send them on a programming course, and so that when they come back, they can use them as automation testers, which works. But after a few months, once they get to know how to do coding, most of these engineers want to convert into a dev role. I've mainly seen this with junior testers. So as a result, again, I'm losing a tester or an automation testers. I've gained a developer, but I've lost an automation tester. So keep that in mind if you're using a scripted BDD. It is a time-consuming process, but as I mentioned, you need to give a lot of time in order to achieve that automation, 100% automation or close to 100% automation. Resources are hard to find. Good automation test engineers it's a difficult skill, and it is hard to find. And you can look at it in Glassdoor. At least in UK, they are paid more than a dev role. So yeah, resources are hard to find. I've seen this as well, because they have to do the coding and also they have to do the testing. I've seen automation testers sometimes end up spending less time on testing, which defeats the whole purpose. And finally, you will end up having quite a lot of code, which is difficult to maintain, and the code grows tremendously. However you do, the code grows tremendously. So those are the issues with scripted BDD automation, and please do keep that in mind if you're taking that route. So with NoCodeBDD, you can automate in minutes. You don't need to write any code. What it does is, I'll show you in a minute. Can you all still see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So this is NoCodeBDD. So these are the feature files which we created for demo and other purposes. So let me show you how easy it is. I'm going to write a simple feature, user response. Let's say user response. Validate user. I'm just making it quite simple just for the sake of this demo. When simple called response message should match expected message. So till now, there's absolutely no difference from scripted BDD or any scripted BDD, made Cucumber, SpecFlow, or anything. All I'm doing is just writing my feature, my scenario, and my steps. This is where NoCodeBDD would start making a difference. So for scripted BDDs, you would typically take and start writing, step definition using Java or any other language for each of these steps, if it's not duplicated, right? So with NoCodeBDD, all you have to do is go step definition, create a new step definition. In this case, I'm calling an REST API. So I'm going to send a REST API. So this is the API, it's just a generally publicly available API. I'm just going to paste this. Oops. Sorry. Key wrong. So I'm just going to call that REST API, right? And then in the next step, I'm going to check the value, assert the value that I get from the REST API. In this case, I'm going to assert this value. So this is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting Janet Weaver. So that's it. You can see my automation is completed. All I have to do is just click it, run it. It failed for some reason. Maybe I haven't put the message in. So if I go back, so if I run this, oops, for some reason it's failing. Okay, I'm not getting a value from the REST API for whatever the reason. Maybe the REST API is down or something. Let me try that again. Okay, I've got a wrong API there. That's why it failed. So if I run it again, that's it. My automation is completed. It's as simple as that. You can see all the information passed for the REST API. So if you want to debug any issues, you can still go and debug it. And you will also see the messages being sent and back. And let's say if the developer has made a mistake, instead of sending Janet, let's say if the application sends John, and then you're running it, you can clearly see, okay, these are the differences. So automating, is, just click off a button, you can pretty much automate anything. So as I've shown you, you can automate UI, you can automate MQ and something. So I just want to show you what are the things you can automate. So as you can see, you can automate REST, you can automate MQ, you can automate database SQL, UI. You don't need to know Selenium or anything. You can also write your custom code. So it can automate pretty much anything. So for an example, you might ask, what about the edge cases? So certain things, you can't click and do certain things. So how will you do that? Use a custom code. So custom code, you can just go and write your own Java code there. So that's why I created NoCodeBDD based on all my experience in rolling out BDD to make the automation simpler. So the team can continue to focus on solving the business issues and really achieving those automation goals without having to spend quite a lot of money all the time. So that's 8 minutes in. There are several features NoCodeBDD offers. You can pretty much automate anything, as I've showed you. Reports are really nice. You can pretty much create reports. I will cover that in a minute because reports are quite important as well. I've shown you custom code. You have Git to collaborate. It's got all the Cucumber features like examples, tags, and all that. Then it's got a lot of other features like you can do parallel run. I don't know how many of you use Cucumber, but Cucumber, you need to go and do something. You have to develop it in order to achieve the parallel run. That's such an underestimated way of doing it because when you work on a project let's say if you're working on a project using BDD properly for about a year, you will start seeing your BDD run will slowly start taking an hour or 2 hours. And if you don't fix it upfront, you will end up running quite a lot of time just running your BDD features, which is really not good for the team because in agile testing, fail fast is the most important one. So we have come up with parallel run. Just click off a button, it will run parallelly, and it's got all the other things like we also integrate with browser stack. You can raise bugs from NoCodeBDD into Jira directly. So all those. So how NoCodeBDD can help? It can reduce your time, as I've shown you. Automating, any scenario takes minutes. You can automate without automation engineers, so that you can use your automation engineers for really edge cases, and pretty much all the automation can be done either by the manual tester or even by the PA. Reduce your resource cost dramatically. We also provide professional services, so you can augment your BDD automation if you require. You can spend more time on actual testing because, as you see, it takes minutes to automate. So you can think about writing a lot more scenarios and not worry about cutting down the scenarios. And it's got all the enterprise features. So this is one of the case study done by one of our clients before they took NoCodeBDD. So they asked their automation testers how long it would take to automate about 45 scenarios, because those are the ones they took when they did a POC with NoCodeBDD, and they estimated 96 hours for 45 scenarios. In my view, that's quite less. I would have thought it would be around between 120 and 160 hours, but 96 hours is what they estimated. And in NoCodeBDD, it took them 8 hours. So that's the difference NoCodeBDD can make. So you can watch it in our YouTube. We have taken a scenario, we showed side by side, and the same scenario took about 18 minutes in Cucumber, and it took only 1 minute and 35 seconds in NoCodeBDD. So this is the report. Whether it's NoCodeBDD or any other like Cucumber you want to use, you need a report like this. So what it tells you the health of your entire application. So it says, okay, out of 23 scenarios, I've got 3 scenarios failure. So I want to look at those scenarios. In this case, I've got failures in beneficiary management and MQ. So as a Scrum Master or a QA lead, you can look at it and make a decision, decision to release it or not. In this case, the MQ, which is, let's say, that's a very technical scenario to test something in MQ, and the beneficiary management are failing. And I know for this release, they are not going to enable beneficiary management. So I can talk to my management and say, okay, let's go with this release, and then we will fix anything that maybe in the beneficiary management or MQ, maybe in the next sprint, whenever the business decides to enable beneficiary management. So these type of reports are quite important, and it's just one report that you require to make a lot of decisions. This report also enables the developer and the QA to look at it and say, okay, what are all the failures? What are all the fixes I need to make? So this is quite a good report, and it also gives you an overview. Not only overview, it also gives you the details. With NoCodeBDD, you can also drill down and look at exactly why it has failed, where it has failed. There's another good report. Again, I believe you can get similar report in Cucumber as well. Not exact report, but similar report, which tells you an overall status of your report. This is quite a good management report. It's good to have that as well. It tells you how much of automation being achieved, how much are not automated. So it tells the management what is this current status of your automation, the number of resources they might require in order to achieve, take it closer to 100% automation. Okay, this is an interesting point I thought I should make. You would have seen in a lot of videos and a lot of articles that people like me or other experts like who have done BDDs longer than me keep talking about BDD, why it's so good and why you have to do BDD in certain way. But one point I generally haven't seen is why BDD stands out. You might think about BDD and say, no, we do collaboration. Yes, we can use a technique and we can use an automation. So why do I have to use BDD? For me, this is the reason why I have to use BDD. This is where BDD makes a significant difference, because you can actually execute your requirement. All your requirements are written in one place and kept in one place. The requirements are understood by the business. It's in plain language. It's not in some obscure programming language where someone has to translate to them. And not only that, the best bit is when you automate it. Let's say after you have done the automation, for some reason, some code being changed, your requirements fail. When you execute the requirement, your requirements would fail. In other words, your BDD feature files would fail. So any changes in the implementation forces your team to go and update the requirement. Let's say if a developer and the BA just had a discussion over a coffee, and the developer decides to go and make a change in the code without updating their requirement, which happens all the time. When we use BDD, the BDD won't allow, because your requirements will fail. In other words, your feature files would fail. And vice versa. If the BA goes and updates, or the tester goes and updates any of these features without telling the developer, again, these features will fail. So your requirements and your code is always in sync. Not just that, the people who are not technical can come and look at it and understand what's going wrong. They can look at a scenario failing and say, okay, this particular scenario is failing. I know what's going wrong, rather than a tester who has written all the automation in a programming language telling the BA that this particular scenario is failing, rather than the BA understanding, or the product owner, or someone who's not technical. That's why I believe the BDD stands out. So path to production. Again, I thought I should include it because a lot of people struggle with this. When they implement BDD, how do they roll out that in the product. So as I've said, you start deriving the BDD scenarios as a first step. That should be your first step. Once that's done, the tester goes and creates a branch for the BDD so that the tester can enter all these features, scenarios that's been discussed and derived. Typically, what I would advise is if you are using Jira, which I know is kind of a de facto in pretty much every organization, or if you are using a similar story tracking tool like Trello, you get an ID, Jira ID or a Trello ID. Then you add to that ID, you prefix that ID, and you add a very small description. So that the idea behind that is, if somebody wants to know details about that particular story or implementing just by looking at the branch, they can look at the ID and go back to Jira or somewhere and look at the whole story. This description just purely tells a very short description, explain what you're trying to implement. So the tester creates a branch and the developer also creates a branch, which is very similar to that. Then the tester automates the scenario. While the tester is automating the scenario, the developer also implements the solution. And when it's ready, the developer runs the BDD. The tester pushes the automated scenarios and the developer picks that from the branch and then runs the BDD. If the BDD fails, the developer has to fix it. However time they run, every time it needs to pass, and only when it passes, then they merge it to the master or merge it to whatever branch you decide. Then as soon as it gets merged, the CI/CD pipeline should run automatically. If the CI/CD pipeline fails, the team needs to jump into it and then fixes whatever the failing scenario. It could be maybe the scenario that they've just implemented, or it may be a knock-on effect. So your regression pack would fail, and you might have to go and fix all the scenarios that failed. That should be the first step. We call it as stop the world. This is quite important because let's say if the scenario fails and you don't, as a development team, you don't fix it, someone else, some other developer would come and take it from the master, which means they've inherited the bug that is already in the master. So it's going to get more and more complex. So it's quite important you stop everything and fix this issue. Then you can release it to the higher environments. So that's how you go to path to production. And finally, how you define when the team says, okay, now I've completed the story, what is the definition of done? So the first is the team needs to, first of all, the BA or the product owner has to review and approve all the BDDs that's been written, all the features and scenarios. Then the team has to give a demo and get the approval. So the demo happens via the feature file. So this is absolutely brilliant. You can run these scenario and show the demo. Nothing obscure or anything. You say, okay, these are all the 7 scenarios we agreed upfront. I'm going to run each of those scenarios and show you it's all passing. And that's what the product owner would expect. We have agreed 7 scenarios. Show me those 7 scenarios. I will run it. So the product owner can actually see your scenarios that was discussed upfront, being implemented, and it's they could run it and see. And then the typical code and QA review. All BDDs passed against master branch. In fact, part of the evidence we give is we take a snapshot of Jenkins. That's what I've used in quite a lot of projects, and then show that all BDDs been passed. Not just the one that I've implemented, the entire regression pack, because the one I implemented might have caused some other issue for some other scenarios. So I have to show all the entire regression pack being passed and demo to product owner or the client. So that's all from this. You can reach out to me. You can follow our blog. We also publish video once a week about BDD, just generally about BDD, generally about how to roll out BDD, what are the different process, like OOPSI is one of the technique, but there are other things that I've done in a lot of other projects as well. So we'll be rolling out, we will be publishing videos once a week. So you can follow our YouTube channel, and you can reach out to me at Jerome@NoCodeBDD.com anytime. And not just about NoCodeBDD. Even if you have general BDD questions, feel free to reach out to me. So that's all from me. Any questions?
Awesome, Jerome. If you go to full screen now, that'd be awesome, so people can see you.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right, cool. All right, so we have a few questions. We have some in YouTube, and also we have some questions that have been submitted so far. The first one is from YouTube, and I believe their name is ECC Itrick. For UI testing, does it use Selenium? How can you debug or troubleshoot a test? Where does the browser launch?
Brilliant question. Yes, it does use Selenium. The browser, let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So we have UI testing. You can decide which browser you want to launch. So we have all these browsers. You don't have to worry about setting up the driver or anything. You can update Chrome driver, and then it'll pick the Chrome driver you want, or the Firefox, or the Edge, or the Safari. We also have browser stack settings, so you can configure any browser stack you want if you have browser stack login, and it'll integrate with browser stack. Hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. So I'll be monitoring. If you have a follow-up, let me know. I'll be looking in YouTube. The next question is submitted through our chat feature that I definitely need to improve upon, but they want to know. First one's from Karthik. He wants to know, should we discuss and include negative scenarios as well in our BDDs?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the technique. I'll be publishing a video about it. So one of the most important one is when you have the discussion with your team, it's quite important you start discussing about positive and the negative video, and don't eliminate any scenarios. The idea behind that is every scenario is important. That's how you think, or that's how you should think. You derive all the scenarios the team can think of. There are several reasons for it. One is you never know what scenarios are important until you go and discuss it with your team. And two, by eliminating some of the scenarios or discouraging some of the scenarios, indirectly you are discouraging the team members as well. And it's particularly will have a lot of impact on team members who are maybe a bit shy or might need a bit more confidence. So it's quite important you encourage your team members to come up with all sorts of scenarios. You put all the scenarios on the board. Then you use some sort of technique, which I'll publish a video about it, to prioritize those scenarios. So yes, you should have negative scenarios, but end of the day, as a team, including the product owner, the developer, and the tester, not just the product owner. Yes, the product owner will have a lot of say about the scenario and should explain why it's important for the business. But as a team, you decide these are all the scenarios we are going to implement.
Perfect. All right, another question we have from Karthik. Actually, this is from Gustavo. Wants to know, is it possible to use this for UI automation as well as API testing for a flow, or are you able to integrate both approaches all in one BDD scenario?
I presume he's asking about NoCodeBDD.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. You can mix and match. You can mix UI, you can mix API, you can mix MQ, or you can mix relational database. You can mix anything you want, including the custom code. You can include a custom code in one of the steps.
Perfect. Another question's from YouTube. They want to know, does a BA or PO review the automated scenarios or the scenarios before they're automated?
That's an excellent question. So what you do is at the start of implementing any user story, you derive the scenarios, and the team decides, okay, these are all the scenarios we are going to implement and we are going to automate. When the BA or the product owner reviews that is when it comes to the end of the sprint, and then say, okay, the team has come back and said, okay, we have, as agreed, we have done these 7 scenarios. That's the time the BA or the product owner says, okay, these are the scenarios I've agreed. Yes, and show me the demo. At that time, the BA or the product owner can look at the team, talk to the team and say, ooh, we agreed 7, but you have implemented only 5. What happened to those 2? So those are all the discussion you have. So it is an excellent question. So you start with deriving the scenarios, you end with approving those scenarios.
Great answer. So Karthik had another question. He wants to know, what are some of the tips to achieve BDD automation in sprint in a 2-week type sprint?
I'm going to be a bit cheeky and say use NoCodeBDD, but I completely understand. I'm not here to sell NoCodeBDD. I'm just here to part or share my knowledge about rolling out BDD. In all the projects I worked, the achieving 100% or close to 100% BDD automation is only by having each developer, if you are using scripted BDD, pairing pretty much each developer with a QA. If worst case, you can have maybe 1 less QA. Let's say if you have 5 developers and maybe 4, and if you have really, really, really good QA automation test engineers, then maybe 3. But less than that, I don't see that you achieving 100% automation unless you use some sort of scriptless tools.
Great. Another question, this is from Chris Trimper. Chris wants to know, can you talk about what benefits you may see for testing teams who want to adopt NoCodeBDD without buy-in from the product teams?
Without buy-in from the product teams?
Yeah.
From the product owner, you mean?
A product owner. Chris, you could clarify, let me know, but so he said product teams.
Okay. Let's go with that assumption that he means product owner.
Yep.
So the benefit of it is, like, in other words, how do you get your team to implement BDD properly? I think, how do you make that cultural shift?
Yep.
Right. So I've worked on a project where it is difficult to make that cultural shift as soon as you start throwing terminology which the teams are not used to. So what I generally do is I don't throw the terminology. So when somebody gives me the user story as a tech lead, what I say is, oh, let's have a collaboration. Let's discuss about this and see, what is this user story is about. So that's what you would do in BDD as well. You start with collaboration. I won't talk about OOPSI. I'll say, okay, let's get onto the board and say, okay, what is the business outcome? And talk to the product owner and say, okay, why do we do this? Who is this for? And then you write that down. That's the business outcome. Then you talk to your tester or the developer and say, okay, that's my business outcome. I've written that down. Tell me, in order to achieve that business outcome, what should be my output? So you basically have that conversation that way. You don't, BDD is nothing but doing agile properly. You have your discussion up front, agree everything that you want to implement in that sprint, and you achieve that sprint. So BDD is nothing but that. The only difference that BDD makes is the slide I showed you, where you define your feature file. So you don't throw any of these terminology. You just say, let's have a discussion. Let's clarify a few points and then go through the collaboration process. Don't tell them anything about OOPSI, but you still follow OOPSI. And then once it's all done, then you talk to your team and say, okay, let's do the automation and achieve your automation. So that way I've done a lot of implementation as well. But once you have done this few times, then you can start slowly bringing on the terminology and say, look, what we do is called OOPSI. Then the team is not like too scared about like making changes because they know they're following a process and it's just named differently.
Nice. Another question's from YouTube. They want to know, in BDD, you write scenarios and the automation in a separate step, if I understand correctly. Here it seems that you directly jump to automation. Is that correct?
No, not really. So what you do is in BDD, let's say you take Cucumber. What you do is you define your feature file, you define your scenarios, and you define your steps. Yes, I completely agree with you. You don't do the automation. It's exactly same in NoCodeBDD. So for the purpose of this meeting, I've shown you how to do automation. But what you do is, let me share the screen again. So let's say I've got a feature. So as a team, let's say you're taking user story 1. And then let's say scenario, or let's say bank asset, something like that. You define your scenarios. Maybe you can define all the scenarios. Bank login check. So you define all the scenario. You don't have to worry about even defining the steps during the scenario derivation process. Then as a QA and a tester, you can go and write all your steps. So given login page is launched, blah, 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 all this. You don't even have to worry about automation. You worry about automation only when you know you have all the information for the automation. Similarly, how you would do exactly in Cucumber. So you can still have that differentiation.
For your answer. Yep. Good stuff.
You're there. Sorry.
Yeah. That's I'm not that quick with my buttons yet. But thank you so much, Jerome. Those are all the questions we have submitted, and we're almost out of time as well. So any parting words of wisdom you want to leave the test guild?
No. My suggestion is definitely go with BDD. No, I wouldn't embark on a project without BDD. Yes, you will have some challenges, but those challenges are easy to resolve when you know compared to like on a project where you don't use BDD. No, BDD gives you that space as a developer, as a tester. It doesn't put you out of space because you're agreeing everything upfront. So you don't get squeezed at the end. So typically, I've seen this mainly for QAs, where the developer delays everything. As a result, the QA ends up spending the last 1 day or 2 days quickly doing some testing. And they are the one who end up spending their late hours and weekends. With BDD, everything gets defined upfront. You start your automation or the testing process pretty much similar to when the developer starts their implementation. And it has a lot more benefits than what I could explain in this next 2 minutes. So definitely go BDD, whether it's using scriptless or scripted. I hope you will take scriptless because the basic version is free, and even the business or the enterprise version is not pricey at all.
Sounds good. Thank you again, Jerome. Really appreciate you, and hopefully we'll have you back to maybe take a deeper dive if we get more questions. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I would love to come back.
Cool. Thank you, Jerome. Talk to you later. Cheers.
Yes, Joe. Right. Thank you.
All right, everyone, before we go, I just want a quick plug to let you know we actually had a session set up for BDD. However, she dropped out, so I'll try to find a replacement. But the 6th annual online event dedicated 100% to Automation Guild. It's an online event I started in 2017, way before all this COVID online events by these corporates took over. This is like an indie, attendee-led event. Chris Tripper can vouch for it. It's more like a awesome meetup with a lot of activity. So if you haven't attended yet, or if you never attended, I highly recommend you do. It's a 5-day event. The first 3 days dedicated completely to functional automation, and the last 2 days dedicated to other DevOps, security DevOps type topics. So we're covering functional automation. We have Selenium topics. We have design pattern topics. If you go to automationguild.com, you can actually see some of our early committed speakers. And so some of these people you'd probably be familiar with. There's a few sessions on Cypress, how to use Cypress for API testing. We have Paul Grizafi joining us. We have topics on accessibility testing, Appium, end-to-end testing, design patterns, accelerating cloud transformations, chaos engineering, Cypress for visual testing, how to automate your CI/CD infrastructure, Selenium 4, automating Flutter, a whole bunch of awesomeness. These are just the speakers so far that I've submitted. More are coming their way. But if you register now, if you actually sign up for the early bird, as soon as I open up registration, which hopefully is in a few days, you will get a huge discount code to get on this. So hurry up and get on that now. All you need to do is go to automationguild.com. I just want to thank everyone once again for joining us for this webinar. If you have any suggestions for any upcoming webinars, let me know. And I just appreciate all your help. And thank you everyone for participating. This new platform, I'll actually be using a new chat Q&A widget because I wasn't happy with the default one we just used today because everyone can't see everyone's chats and questions all in one place. So I'll try to fix that for next time. So that's it for now. And once again, thank you everyone. And I'll see you hopefully the next webinar or at Automation Guild. Just go once again to automationguild.com and I'll see you there. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.